It's Jefferson, climbs the ladder. Oh my goodness!
What is up, Jabroni? JJ back here with Coop, talking a little NASCAR, Pocono 400, tricky triangle, as some cool kids like to call it. It's like a hybrid super speedway. Coop, I'll let you talk more on that when we get to it. Last week, kind of saw place differential take a real shit. It looked like some of your chalkiest guys last week did not get there. A few of them did. But for the most part, your chalkiest guys simply did not get there. Now, Truex did, right? Almost end to end. But your place differential guys from the back, which a lot of people were overly stacking, just didn't get there. Coop, what was your thoughts on how last week ended out? And maybe talk a little bit on how you ended up doing.
Yeah, Ty Gibbs really screwed a lot of people. I mean, you know, he wasn't stellar throughout the entire race, and he was solid. He was going to score very well.
Hey, Coop, what happened? Because I only watched the first stage and I stopped watching. He was in like 13th place. He jumped 20 spots in the first stage, and you must have been thinking, "Oh, we're home now. He's just got to hold his position, and he's in the optimal."
He had some car issues right at the end. So, you know, I think he finished 25th, 26th, 27th, somewhere in that ballpark. I don't know. But yeah, he hurt a lot of people drastically. So, but you know, that's DFS, where you never look at your lineups until the end, because I'm sure there were a lot of people that were doing very, very well, and then they lost all that money, and then the people that weren't doing well gained it all. So, but it happens.
Yeah, no, exactly. Is what it is. What's up, Gavin, Zach, Jake? Interesting track today. You have some laps, not a lot of laps, though. It's a long track. So to your point, Coop, on, you know, where it probably doesn't feel like a total super speedway in that respect. But talk us through the track here in general, some things we might want to look for, and then I'll briefly touch on Jason's free article, which, by the way, is available at runpuresports.com, completely free. And by the way, for you freeloaders that are watching this without a Run Pure subscription, that's fine. You know, we're not gonna critique you guys. But you can like this video. It's not hard. It's free. It's content, right? We just popped off the baseball video with more good content. And here we are again on a Sunday afternoon. I could promise you, I could think of 400 things that I'd rather be doing right now than talking NASCAR with an hour with my buddy Coop. Nothing against you, Coop, but it's a beautiful day out. I could be outside naked right now, but instead I'm here talking, you know, race cars with Coop. So ultimately, least you can do, guys, is like the video. It's not hard. All right, so Coop, some things to look for with this track. Obviously a popular track. So talk us through maybe some strategy they might be looking into, track history if you'd like. Then I'll talk a little on Jason's article, and then we'll dive into your playbook.
Yeah, 2.5 miles. You know, it's an intermediate package they're using. They're not using like the Atlanta, Talladega, Daytona type of package. You're not going to see drafting and stuff like that. Flat track, 3 different turns, different sizes and stuff like that. Long straightaways. On the front stretch, on restarts, you'll see them fanning out 2, 3, 4 wide. Could be an issue on restarts. You know, here recently in all the series, we've been having some issues on restarts. So look for that to possibly be an issue. But it's a short race, lap-wise, like you talked, 160 laps. And really, if you look at like history, it's kind of interesting because they had that 160 laps last year, and then they had a doubleheader the year before, so they shortened the races. Then, you know, they had COVID, you know, which shortened the races too. So it's been a while, minus last year, since they ran these 160 laps here. So that's something to keep an eye on. One thing that's going to be key is strategy. And how it plays out is difficult to, you know, figure out who's going to do what. You're going to see some drivers short pit before the end of stage 1 to try to gain track position. You're going to see drivers stay out at the end of stage 1 so they can get stage points. And, you know, the drivers that are up front, very well likely at one point or another in this race will probably be 15th to 20th place. You go back, you look at last year's race, Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin were the winners before they got disqualified. They both started first and second. They both finished first and second, but neither one of those drivers finished in the top 10 at the end of stage 1 or stage 2. So, speed is really important here. And then, you look at like practice yesterday, and it's really difficult to gauge who had the fastest cars of the group up top, because we had a situation where the clouds were funneling in and funneling out. And sometimes there was shade on the track. Sometimes there was partial shade on the track. Sometimes it was fully sun covered. The drivers, obviously, that had more shade, had a big advantage to putting up better speeds. So it's really difficult, from that aspect to gauge who, really has the best cars up front.
It's definitely a lot to consider when you're building for this type of track. And as I look at just some brief stuff on the optos, again, it's a heavy place differential chalk day. Obviously there are some guys, middle pack that you could leverage, but we'll talk more on that. I do want to just run through Jason Hamlet's article. Like I said, it's always free at runpuresports.com. Just head over there. It's right off the main page. You can just even go to NASCAR articles or at articles, and you'll see it there at the top. Breaks down the course differently, talks on, at times top 10, top 8, top 6, the DraftKings stores by start range over sometimes the last 3 races, 5 races, 7 races. If you're into track history, obviously he'll go through all that. He gives you a cheat sheet of guys he's going to fade, guys he's going to be high on, and guys he's looking at for leverage. Gives out his core at the top level, gives out his core as pivots, and then talks on, the mid-tier ranges for favorites that he likes as well. Just goes through a bunch of different things. And I'll be honest, this article that he does has grown wings since Origin, because it's a lot longer now than it was. He takes a lot of time with it. Obviously, it gives you guys a ton of options in there. And again, at the end of it, typically gives a core. Now, I don't think he has a core today in that article, but he gave you plenty of fuel to be dangerous for free. But again, we are going to go deeper into this by talking Coop's playbook, right? In the playbook every week, the Dominators, place differential guys, mid-tiers, value guys, and then total fades. So if you're already a Run Pure member, not that I want to kick you off this video, obviously you get added input, but if you're already a Run Pure member, you don't need to listen to this video because you already have all this content that we're going to run through in front of you. Granted, if you like our beautiful faces, happy to keep you here. But if you're just a member, code SUMMER33 gets 33% off the week of the month, and you'll have all the data you need to do well weekly in NASCAR, moving forward. Now, just a quick shout to more people in the chat. Kyle, can we cover Cindric and LaJoie? We definitely will. Jason, what is one optimal build? 1 Dom, 5 place differential. Coop, right before I'll just get to these concepts. Right before we do it, let's talk on what you're doing for lineup construction, even at a high level. Brian, freeloaded, thank you. Appreciate you hitting the like. Almirola, we'll talk on him as well, Zach. Thanks, Kyle, for that like. Otter, imagine going outside. I'll tell you this, imagine going outside with clothes on. Gavin, it depends. If you're in the right neighborhood, some people respect the fact that you're not wearing clothes. Shark Killer G, I'll be honest, like the scoring system for DK, I assume you're talking DFS, not betting. I feel like it's good. Like, I just feel like if they started making changes, it'll have more negatives than positives. I do feel like the way the scoring works in NASCAR is pretty strong. Granted, it's a pricing issue you have at times with why ownership gets driven up to where it is, but we'll talk through more of that. So ultimately, before we get into this, Coop, this track in particular with the least amount of really true laps led, does that 1 Dom 5 place differential make sense? It does feel like that's going to be the popular build.
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the past here, the last 2 races have been 160 laps. The main Dominators led 50 to 63 laps. And then after that, you've had, 3 to 5 other drivers lead anywhere from 10 to 30 laps. So they're not necessarily getting Dom points. I guess maybe they're bonus points, maybe like place differential type of points. So, I think it all depends upon, how qualifying laid out. You could definitely run this as a 2 Dominator race. if you want to. But I'm leaning more towards one Dominator strictly because of the two place differential drivers, who are back in the back, who are going to have a good chance of accumulating plenty of points. And I think it comes down to, if those two drivers do very well, they're going to nullify the other drivers up top who get those small bonus points, and only lead 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 laps. I don't think it'll hurt the one main Dominator, as long as there is one main Dominator. But, it's impossible to make a lineup with two of the high-priced Dominators and then two of those are the two chalky place differential drivers. So you've either got to make a choice that you're going to play two Dominators and one of those drivers, or one Dominator and two of them. So it just depends upon how this, qualifying laid out. And for this instance, that's how it laid out.
And that makes sense. Guys, 100 plus of you watching, only 31 likes. We can do better than that. Go ahead and take that finger out of your ass and just go ahead and quickly like the video. Not hard, honestly, not complicated at all. Not splitting atoms, not asking for a cancer cure, not asking you for blood. Go ahead and like the video. And also feel free to keep commenting. I'll try to get to all these one by one. Kyle, before we go into your playbook, Coop, Kyle, Cindric LaJoy, I'm going to be honest with you. Coop can weigh in as well. Cindric LaJoy, completely unplayable from my stance. I understand they're cheap. They will be low owned. But to me, completely unplayable, just based on how much place differentials up for grabs today. Coop, would you agree these guys are starting inside the top 10? They're priced low. Their win equity is brutally bad. What are you doing anything with Cindric LaJoy today?
Fading him.
Okay. And that makes sense, right? Because it's like, where you're going to, I mean, like, ultimately, one of these dudes could finish in like 6th or 7th and still may not make the optimal of all these place differential guys.
Like, I couldn't tell you the last time Corey LaJoy had a top 10 finish outside of Atlanta, Talladega, or Daytona. And Austin Cindric's just tough to trust. And to your point, like, they're starting so far forward ahead. If they finish 6th or 7th or 8th, they probably still need some other drivers to have, some serious issues and struggle, so that they can become optimal.
100%. And Kozlowski definitely agree there, Jake. I would consider him semi-sneaky. He should see about 20% ownership today. But yes, in NASCAR language, 20% is kind of sneaky, because every driver is typically over 25% anyway. All right, so let's start going through these, and I'm rolling Bowman. We will talk through as we go. Dominators, Coop. Who do we like here? It's hard to believe a winning lineup today has two or more Dominators. Not to say it can't happen. It can. You're just going to need some serious things to go wrong from the back of the pack. What are we doing with Dominators here? And are you going more than one in certain laps? I know you talked on the one potential 1-3 build with a few middle tier guys, but Dominators, how many max you going, and who's your favorites?
I'm going to stick with one Dominator or zero Dominators.
Zero. Now, zero's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I see a path to where, like, if you look at this race last year, the drivers that started first and second, like I said, they did not, stay out at the end of the stage. They fought their way back up. And, basically, like I said yesterday, these drivers who are starting first through eighth, it's so close to say who's better between them, because some of them had advantage of running, under the clouds. Some of them didn't get that advantage. Some of them ran in the first group, which wasn't as fast as the second group when it comes to the qualifying and practice sessions. So it's really a coin flip between, all these drivers right now. I like Denny Hamlin. He's done great here. I thought he had not the best advantages yesterday and still showed very good speed. Same with Kyle Larson. Same situation. Chris Bell, a driver I'm going to fade, he wasn't very good. And then the clouds came out. They put down a monster lap. Kevin Harvick, I think he had a little bit of an advantage. The 23 XI cars of Bubba Wallace and Reddick, not to say that these cars aren't going to be fast. I think they just had a little bit better advantage, and they might, not be on the same platform or same level, I think, as a Larson and a Denny, in my opinion.
Now, so I look at this here, and yeah, not a lot of people are going to play Dominators. Larson's going to be lower owned than he typically would be. Truex is the most expensive driver on the slate, I think, which makes him hard to play, in my opinion, based on how many laps you'll need him to lead from that number. Byron, of course, at the pole, nothing crazy there, yay or nay. Hamlin does make the most sense, gives you a little place differential upside. He's the race favorite. He's going to see ownership today, no doubt about it. And Christopher Bell's at least cheap. Kevin Harvick's at least cheap. I can't play Logano. Reddick from the front. I could be convinced there. I don't love it, but
my issue with Reddick is something happens to him every week. Here recently. Eventually it's going to stop, but he's just in a rut right now. And if you're playing multi-entry or even 1 or 2 lineups, you got to make choices, and you can't play all these guys because it's going to dilute your ownership within your pool, and you're not going to have any type of ownership edge on any of the drivers. You're all going to be filled, weight to the field on them. So my choice, I just can't play Byron and I can't play Truex because I don't think they're the best cars. I think they're good. I think they're top 5 cars, but I can see them leading a couple laps, 15, 20, but then falling back and losing those points that they earned. So I'm just going to go the safer route and play the drivers that are starting farther back.
And look, it makes total sense, right? It's not like rocket science that it's tough to get multiple Dominators in the lineup and even really love one that you're going with. But yeah, it will make you different. There's not going to be a lot of people putting 2 Dominators in their lineups. You could go 2. You could be real reckless and go 3 and just hope absolute fucking chaos ensues, which, look, in this sport, it's not totally crazy. Just giving you some food for thought. So let's talk.
If you're going 2, you're really hoping for some chaos. If you're going for 3, you're hoping for some super chaos.
Yeah, you're
especially hoping, the drivers starting in the back.
Yeah, you're hoping just 25 through 36 are just abolished.
That's why I think going with none of them. I'm not going to have a bunch with none of them, but going with none of them is going to make you different right away.
100%.
And, it provides you with a lineup that has upside. Now, does that upside work for you? I don't know.
100%. All right, so let's move over to place differential. Obviously, the most popular piece most weeks. It will be again popular this week. Alex Bowman was touched on in the chat. Almirola was touched on in the chat. I know, Coop, as I look through this, I don't see Almirola in here. He is going to see some ownership today, so let's talk on him as well. But talk on who you really like. I know Kyle Busch will be popular from a place differential standpoint. He's got good win equity here. He's starting from pretty far back, all things considered. Chase Elliott should be in the mix. Our friend, Mr. Chastain, could be in the mix. So these are all guys I know that you're high on to a certain extent. So talk through some of that and even touch on Almirola as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott are going to be the more popular drivers, probably the 2 most popular on the entire slate. Busch brings you win equity, brings you, outside Dominator upside. Chase Elliott, I think you're really playing for the place differential. It really depends. Chase, there's 6 races left. He's well outside of the points to make the playoffs. He really needs a win. So, I would think he would be one of those drivers that short pit, at the beginning of the race and tries to gain some track, position. His car was all right. It's been all right. Nothing special. I think, he makes that choice. He stays up there. It's good for him. I don't think he's going to fall back to the back in the field. He's not that slow by any means. But I don't know if he has, upside like Kyle Busch to dominate. So Chase just needs a 15th place finish, to make value. Kyle Busch needs 7th. Both of them are very reasonable. And, the thing is, if both of them hit and you went with 2 Dominators, you're not going to, do well because they're going to outscore that second Dominator in most cases. So that's why, I prefer, the one Dominator or no Dominator. Ross Chastain, I'm not really big on Ross right this particular moment. He did well last year at this track. He was leading until he had his little incident near the end of the race. And the thing is, I say this every week, like which Ross is going to show up, the fast one or the one that isn't. It's hard to judge by practice because typically he's not a great, practice driver, but he didn't look very good. His price is up there. I think he's going to garner more ownership than what he deserves. So that's why I'm going to fade him. Alex Bowman, I'll have some Alex Bowman. The guy's struggling. He's in the same boat as like Chase Elliott. Not as far out in points, but needs some wins in order to get to the playoffs. And the guy was very good at the beginning of the year, and eventually it's going to turn around for him. Eric Amarola, I'm not going to play because they've struggled all year with speed on this package. And I think that he didn't show much speed in practice. And like you said, he's going to have a little bit of chalk. And I think there's other drivers who you can pivot off of him who have just as much upside.
Yeah, well, a lot over there to sift through, and we'll talk briefly on a middle tier guy in Ryan Blaney in a bit, but a lot there, right? I think that it's hard if you play Kyle Busch. It's hard to love playing Kyle. Jesus, throat. It's hard to love playing him with a Dominator because then you really need value guys to crush for you at that point from a place differential standpoint. So I think you're going to be different if you're playing Busch with a Dominator because I don't think a lot of people are going to do it. It's hard to do it and get in all these chalk guys. So again, you try to find ways where you have an advantage plus EV edge while still being different from the field, right? So I think at minimum, one way to be different, Kyle Busch with a Dominator, with one of those guys starting from the top four. Well, Coop, what's your thoughts on that in general? Pairing Busch with like for instance, pairing Busch with Hamlin and building from there.
No, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. You just need to be a little bit different in other spots. It's a tough, it's going to be hard because like, do you just play Busch and Elliott together or do you pick one or the other? And, anything can happen in racing. We saw last week with Ty Gibbs, but, Kyle Busch runs very well here. And, look at his practice times. They weren't great, but I mean, he did the same thing as what he did in trucks. He went out, ran a couple laps, and then parked it and said, I'm good. And, he just didn't have a good qualifying lap. Whereas, Elliott, they're going to be tough to beat today. I think it's tougher to beat Kyle Busch and Elliott than what it's going to be to beat, like, Gibbs last week. You're really hoping for, something to happen to them. We typically don't see a lot of attrition at this track either.
Fair. That's fair. So let's move over to another pretty popular thing today, the middle tier, right? Briefly touch on Blaney. I'll let you talk on some of these other drivers. Blaney does make a ton of sense today, but he will be popular. So walk me through. Obviously, we've talked place differential. We've talked Dominators. How much work are you doing here in terms of lineup construction for the middle tier? And then talk on some names you really like.
This is usually a section that I really like. But this week it's a little tough because they could end up being shut out. I think they all, carry a little bit of risk with them. But Ryan Blaney is definitely my most favorite of this group. He went out yesterday, had some issues at the very beginning of practice, came right back in. They rectified those issues, and he ended up putting up the fastest 5-lap time of that group. And, typically if you look at it, that group's typically slower than the second group. But the thing I really like about Blaney is that if you look at this particular package, they ran it at Charlotte, he won. the next week at Gateway, he could have won. He was very slow at the end with the pit crew stop, but he finished very well. Then at Nashville, again, very fast. Like, he's been very fast in this package the last 3 times that he's running it. I don't know how popular he's going to be. I think he's a nice pivot off of, Bush, off of Elliott. One play him with one of those. I think he's really nice pivot off of Ross Chastain. So, I do think Chastain's going to get a little bit more ownership than what Blaney's going to get. So, people just struggle to play Ryan Blaney sometimes. And that 9,800 price point, I think, is going to keep some people away, along with the 14th place starting position. I think Blaney's a driver who I would not be surprised ends up winning this race. Then you have Suarez, Buescher, and Allmendinger. They're all starting right around each other. They're all priced right around each other. I'm going to take some shots with all 3 of them. Not going to go crazy with all 3 of them. I expect one of them to do well, possibly 2. But I wouldn't be surprised if only one does well or none does well. So, they don't have a lot of huge upside. I think, outside top 10, somewhere in that ballpark. But then, like, the 2 toughest plays to come upon in this slate, I think, are: do you want to play Bubba Wallace? Do you want to play Ty Gibbs? They were both fast.
What are you doing between them 2 specifically?
They were both fast in practice. Bubba hit the wall. He's going to start 10th. He's not going to go to the rear, from what I've heard so far. And, I think if everything plays right, they could do well. But the thing that concerns me is, let's say, we see some of these drivers who start in front of them decide to short pit at the end of the stage. And, they're still in their, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th positions. They might say, oh, let's stay out. I can get some stage points, because both of them are hot and thick into a playoff battle of needing as many points as they possibly can accrue to make the playoffs. So that's my concern with Bubba and Ty, and that's kind of why I'm leaning towards not playing them. In the past, like, I think this range and these drivers who are starting like around 9th to 13th place, they typically come in with low ownership. They're really risky, but, usually you see one of them do well. Like, I think this week I might be chasing that sneakiness, and I don't want to do that because, it really scares me that they're going to be running for, stage points.
Yeah, I think obviously just a ton there. And this is actually a low-key, pretty popular section in terms of how you can really find your leverage, because everybody's going to be going after the heavy place differential guys. And yeah, guys like this are just not going to see as much ownership as some of these guys, either from way in the back or from close enough to the front where they have higher win equity. So I think this is the really, I don't want to call it unique section because these guys are going to see ownership, but it's really a section where you need to probably have at least 1, maybe 2, possibly even 3 guys in your lineup to really round yourself out.
Like, I don't mind playing like Blaney with one of Suarez, Buescher, and Allmendinger. I just don't know if I want to play 2 of Suarez, Buescher, and Allmendinger, because to get 2 of them to do well is going to be difficult.
Yeah, and again, that's hard. That's hard to argue, regardless, right? And Chase, let me just see where I'm looking at for ownership on Chase. He's priced about the same, right? As so he's 96, starting from 35th. Yeah. So so your quote unquote undoubted chalkiest driver of the slate will be Chase Elliott. So just talk me through. I know we've talked about him a bit as it is, but talk me through what you want to do there. Let's assume, which I don't think is a crazy assumption, by the way. Let's assume he's going to be 50% owned. But are you meeting the field there, going much lower, locking in? What's your take on Chase?
No,
because
I'm not going to meet the field. I'm either going to fade him or I'm going to play him all. So, I think if you meet the field on a driver like that, you're just hoping to hit that one particular lineup that does well. Whereas if you go well overweight or fade, you're looking for him to either do extremely well or not good whatsoever. So, I will probably have a lot of Chase Elliott and a lot of Kyle Busch.
And what would be something that would scare you off Chase? Obviously the price. So for the price where he's coming from, what are we looking at here, Coop? 12th place, 11th place to get value?
15th.
So even better, right? So
yeah,
as I look, and I'll go on FanDuel real quick because I think it's helpful for especially the viewers, and I'll be honest, myself included, right?
Like I think he's more of a risk on FanDuel than what you would say on DraftKings because of how the scoring works. Because you're only getting a half a point versus a full point. And place differential isn't as important as starting position on FanDuel. I mean, finishing position.
Yeah, definitely a fair point there. So FanDuel makes him tougher to play. But as far as I'm just trying to quickly peek T10 odds on Elliott specifically. So Elliott is minus 160 to T10 in this race. Now, granted, take that for what it's worth. The race being what it is, that makes Chase Elliott tough not to play, right? I mean, I get it. You're just, to me, the car stays upright. He's going to finish top 15 today.
What is he? Is he a top 10 odds person though? Are there 10? Look at the rest of the top 10 odds. How many drivers are better than him?
Yeah, so Blaney's slightly better. Kyle Busch is slightly better. William Byron. So basically you got a bunch of guys in this minus 160 area, right? You got Harvick, right. You got Elliott, Blaney's 170, Busch is minus 190. You got Reddick at minus 195. Then you make a huge jump with the top four guys. Byron, Larson, right. Truex, Hamlin. All these guys are over minus 300 to T10 today.
So he needs the top 15. He's within that top 15 of the odds.
He's the eighth highest driver odds to finish inside the top 10. Which, granted, look, these odds are always stacked every week. Elliott's a popular name. I'm not saying there's value for you to go ahead and bet Elliott at minus 160. I'm just trying to let you guys know from a leverage perspective Elliott makes a lot of sense as chalk today. And people will play him because of it. I get it. If you do play Elliott, if you do play Kyle Busch, just realize, make sure in those lineups, whether you're using an optimizer or you're hand building, make sure you're plugging in a guy that is going to be less than 10% owned. Whoever that is. Doesn't matter who, just make sure you plug in a guy that's going to be, because you're taking two sub 50% owned guys at the top of your lineup.
The other thing too is if Chase Elliott finishes 16th or 17th and he doesn't make that 5 times value, but let's say that second Dominator only leads 20 laps, he's still probably going to outscore that second Dominator. So he's kind of in a situation where, he doesn't even need to hit value, but he needs to be right close to it in order to outscore that second, Dominator. But yeah, it's really tough to, not play Chase Elliott today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And look, you guys know, if you've been watching this show weekly, you kind of know that I go out of my way to try to be contrarian in this sport. And I think
there's better ways to be contrarian this week.
Yeah, that's just a tough day. Not to say he can't get there. I know Ty Gibbs let a lot of people down last week. And yes, this sport is meant for variance. So if you're just playing it weekly to fade, great. But I can't stress this enough. In your builds, the lineups that happen to have those 3 names in them, you better, when I say 3 names, if you're including Blaney in there, you better add some low percentage guys. Otherwise, you're going to be in the big fields, you are going to be splitting pots with a lot of dupes.
I think it's smarter to play Chase Elliott and be contrarian in a way of don't play any of the Dominators up top. That'll make it contrarian with Chase Elliott.
Yeah,
because how many of the 50% of lineups that have Chase Elliott aren't going to have a Truex, a Byron, Larson, Hamlin, Reddick, Harvick, Logano? Not many.
100%. So now an interesting place here, especially if you want to play the heavy place differential guys, if you want to stick in a top price Dominator, value guys, right? This is where you're going to have to find some random studs. Well, I say studs, I use that very loosely. Some random drivers that are very cheap to plug up the rest of your lineup. So Coop, walk me through who are some guys that are on your mind that are, say, priced 7K-ish and under.
Yeah, so we just talked about, the chalk of Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch. Now we have the chalk of Todd Gilliland. And, another way to be contrarian is fade Todd Gilliland, because how many lineups that have Bush and or Elliott in it will have Gilliland in it? Quite a few. Guy starting 36th. He spun out, and had some issues. My concern with him is he hasn't been stellar in this package the entire year. I don't know how much upside he has. I think top 25 would be really good for him, but it wouldn't surprise me if he still is in like 29th, 30th, 31st place. So he's much, much riskier to play than, let's say, a Chase Elliott or Kyle Busch. So, even if, let's say, Gillen finishes 25th, if one of these other drivers, finish, 18th, they're going to get more finishing points, and then you put on their place differential points, there's a good chance that they could still, outscore Todd Gillen. So Gillen I won't fade, but I'll definitely be underweight on him. After that, I think the ownership's really spread out throughout the bottom tier, 7K and less drivers. I like Ricky Stenhouse as a nice pivot. He's done well in this package. He's having a great year. Harrison Burton, I don't mind either. Penske did show some speed. He's a Penske affiliated car. I think he's one that comes in lower owned. Austin Dillon, I don't mind him. Eric Jones and Justin Haley are just darts. You hope that they do well at what should be lower ownership. You talked about Amarillo earlier. I like to pivot off of Ryan Preece. Preece will give you a little bit more upside. They both, him and Amarillo, have been horrendous in this package the entire year. But I think, Preece did show a little bit of glimpse with his practice speeds. Although they were small, they weren't bad whatsoever. But, this is just another range where I just want to, mix and match these drivers and hope I hit the right combination. And, I just don't want to be overweight on Gillen. I think the other thing in general, too, I think, like, you got to open up your pool a little bit more this week than maybe what you do most weeks because of the strategy piece, of this particular race. And I think, there might be some drivers. I know I talked bad about Cindric and LaJoie earlier, but who knows? Maybe they flip the field and they end up doing well. I just don't want to take a chance on them. I'd rather take chances on other ones. But, I think you got to open up your player pool this week a little bit more because of, the strategy that gets played within this race.
Yeah, it's obviously there's a lot of different points to be spoken about and how to approach it, right? Speaking of that, let's move over to the final section here. Coop, your fades. Who are guys you think that don't make any sense at all to be in lineups?
I mean, I wouldn't say they don't make any sense. I don't have an issue if you play any of these drivers of Harvick, Bell, or Logano up top. I'm just taking that stand, and I'm not going to go that way. I think that the two of them, Bell and Harvick, drew the better draw and got the clouds and showed a little bit better speed than maybe what they are. Logano, I just have a hard time trusting in this package. This is a package that Ford struggled with all of this season. And the one driver that, has showed that he does have speed from a Ford, car is Blaney. I just continue to see Logano, he does well when he's up front, which he's starting up front, which is a good thing. But the strategy could flip him to the back or the middle. And we've seen Logano a lot of times struggle in the middle to the back of the field, trying to get back up front. I have Keselowski listed here as a fade. I will probably play him and move Bubba and Ty to the fade piece. Keselowski, I think is looking more for a win than what he is for playoff points. He's a little bit more secure when it comes to making the playoffs than a Bubba and a Ty Gibbs. So I think he might be looking, for the win, which would be a more optimal strategy. I don't want to have a lot because, again, Ford, he's a Ford driver. They haven't shown a lot of upside in this package. And, he's slow one week, fast the next week, so on and so forth. We hit on Amarola. Michael McDowell, another driver. Like, I think that's going to take away some ownership from Suarez, Buescher, and Allmendinger. McDowell's just been racing better here recently. The name's more familiarized, with people here recently. So I think that, along with the price, is going to, make Suarez, Buescher, and Allmendinger a nice pivot off of McDowell. And then the guys starting at the bottom, the only one I really might have an interest in is Cole Custer. He has shown a little bit of speed here recently in that Rick Ware car. Who knows? He might be the one. But, Ty Dillon and BJ and Cloud and Yaley, Gregson, I'm not going to have any of them.
So I'll just get to some things in the chat. Obviously, it's been a while since I talked in the chat. So Larson or Hamlin, Coop, what are you doing there?
Larson or Hamlin, if I had to pick one or the other?
Yeah.
I think if you have a chalkier route, I would go Larson because I don't think he's going to be as popular as Hamlin. They are my two favorite drivers at the top, so I don't have an issue with either one. But if you're just going to go one, and like I said, if you have more chalk, I would go with Larson. If you're taking more chances the other way, then Denny, because it gives you a little more upside. Good
stuff. And then what did I see? Bubba said yesterday that they'll be looking after stage points. I mean, yeah, that does mean a lot because if they overexert themselves on a stage, it's going to impact their ability to win the race. So
the one thing though is if you're a fast car, you can pass here. We talk a lot about like these tracks are hard to pass. Not saying that it's easy to pass here, but it doesn't seem to be as difficult as what some other tracks are. Now, to pass through the lead, that's a different story. That's going to be difficult.
Yeah, I think that obviously we'll have to see how it plays out. You mentioned so much about strategy, right, and how all that matters. Ryan Priest, Jake, we talked about him. Obviously, consider us a fan, not obviously in a major way, but decent amount of pivot option there. And yeah, to Coop's point, like, yeah, you can stick some of these guys from the back in the lineup and just hope for some attrition. Gillian, God, his odds to do anything in this race are so bad.
Like he's 1,001 to win, I think.
Yeah, I mean, his odds are just remarkably terrible to do anything in this race. But I guess crazier things have happened. One thing I wanted to ask you, Coop, do we know for a fact everybody that's moving to the back?
The last I heard, it was Elliott and somebody else that was already starting back there.
Okay, so no like crazy news there, right? And I'm sure that the chat would.
Right. The one I would be paying attention to would be like Bubba Wallace and then anybody random.
And then Allmendinger, not the best win equity and not the best T10 equity. I'm just trying to confirm exactly what that number is. Hold on.
He should be a plus.
It's definitely going to be a plus. Looks like plus 430 to T10.
Crazy.
So he's actually got worse odds than Chase Briscoe, which is actually crazy because Briscoe's woof levels.
I mean, I don't mind Allmendinger because it's a flat track. That team has shown a little bit of speed here recently. Him and Haley.
But yeah, from where he's starting from 16th, and he's got the same equity as Briscoe, who's starting just like 12 spots behind him. It's hard to.
Chase Briscoe's been so bad in this package, man.
Yeah, it's like interesting. I mean, it could just be a bad price, but it's just interesting that that's the case. Either way, and McDowell, like the equity is not terrible, all things considered, but like the ownership looks like it's going to be pretty low on McDowell today. I know you said he's a fade. He's just going to be low owned. Could that even convince you if he was going to be, say, less than 8% owned?
Oh, if he's less than 8% owned, I would go after him. But I don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I don't know who. I guess it's tough because you're just not going to get a lot of place differential there. You're just really hoping that he finishes exactly where he's starting.
And the thing is, like, if there was one or two more chalky drivers down at the bottom, like besides Gilliland, like I think that would, make McDowell really lower owned, but there's not. And I think, like I said, after Gilliland, I think the ownership's just going to kind of, spread out between them drivers.
And that makes total sense, right? All right, guys. So we kind of went through all this stuff with you. The race actually starts pretty soon. It's one of the earlier starting races that I could remember. What does it start? It starts is it right at 3? Cooper, right before 3?
Yeah, 2:50.
Yeah, so right before 3. So guys, make sure you get your lineups. Got an hour left. Wish you all the best of luck today. Gamble responsibly, stay safe, and as always, run pure. See you guys next week.